Jack Schmidt, having a few problems.
Let them get a view from there and see what the field of view looks like. They're backing into the cable.
Okay.
Lovely. What was that a demonstration of, by the way? It started out to be of gravity and it wound up.
Oh, got it! Woohoo!
Roger. There's troubleshooting.
There are tons of weird things people have spotted on satellite images in Antarctica. In 2017, this strange dome-like structure was spotted. There were all kinds of conspiracy theories floating around at the time that this could have been something built by some lost ancient civilization or an alien race. There's also this one here. Another dome-looking object which looks to have an opening on the side, almost like some sort of structure built into the ground. A YouTuber named Mr. MBB333 first spotted it. The object looks to be about 150 feet wide and certainly looks man-made to me. As for exactly what it is, I don't know. The entrance to a secret military base, perhaps? Maybe a secret alien base? What's also interesting is that this area is apparently a no-fly zone because of an air sampling camp in the area. Apparently there was also a team of scientists that went missing for a whole week and were picked up from this location by a flight crew. All of that info had been shared by a former naval officer in a letter sent to investigative journalist Linda Moulton Howe. Who knows? Who knows what's going on over there?
Next on the list, we have an image captured of Tycho, the zombie star. Now, if you're wondering, what the heck is a zombie star? Allow me to enlighten you. It's a star that died in a fiery explosion and then came back to life by sucking the matter out of other surrounding stars. Now, think about that while keeping in mind that our sun, the thing that gives us life, is also a star. Very nice. Zombie stars are generally referred to as type A supernovas, with a supernova being the biggest explosion that humans have ever seen, each one the extremely bright and super powerful detonation of a single star. So I guess in the simplest of terms available to the space sciences, zombie supernovas are that twice. But that's not even what makes this photo of Tycho so scary. It's the fact that scientists believe that they can use Tycho as a way to practically measure dark energy. While it's currently just a working theory, dark energy is basically an anti-gravity force that fills the universe with negative pressure, expanding and stretching the very fabric of space and time. Think of dark energy as helium filling up a balloon, and the balloon as the universe. The dark energy helium pushes against the parameters of our universe balloon, making it grow bigger and bigger at a very rapid rate. Now, lucky for us, the universe isn't actually a balloon, so we don't really need to worry about it popping, but you might consider what would happen if, due to expansion, our planet became too far away from the sun. Spoiler alert, we would all die.
Kazakhstan is another area of Earth where strange things have been captured on satellite images. In the remote deserts, all these ancient patterns have been spotted, etched into the earth. The geoglyphs are massive, and there are all sorts of shapes: crosses, squares, rings, even swastikas. All have been dug into the ground or made by rocks. The geoglyphs in Kazakhstan are part of what is called the Turgay Trough, an area where over 260 of these mysterious designs have been found. The most famous of these is the Ustugayski Square. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. But it's a large square formation with diagonal lines crossing through it, stretching about 900 feet on each side. And these patterns are believed to be thousands of years old. But as for who made them and why, that's still a mystery. The fact that these patterns have survived for so long, though, is remarkable. Another cool thing, they were virtually unknown until they were spotted from space. They were first spotted in 2007 by a man named Dimitri Day while he was searching through Google Earth's satellite images.
Next up, we have this image of a pumpkin star, a star that spun so fast it actually flattened itself into the shape of a gourd. If you're wondering how the heck this could happen, allow me to explain. You see, pumpkins pumpkin stars are actually created by the merging of two separate sun-like stars, which is why they spin so fast and create the shape that they do. It's like when two line dancers hook arms and swing each other around the room using the rotations from the other to improve the speed of their own until they merge into one massive pumpkin-shaped country music fan. Guess it's not exactly like that, but it's pretty similar. Anyways, the rare star, or should I say stars, as astronomers have discovered 18 of these guys since May of 2009, were found using X-ray detection and star mapping, as well as satellites. This worked incredibly well because these Halloween-ready catastrophic supernovas waiting to happen produce X-rays at levels more than 100 times the peak levels of X-ray production ever recorded from our own sun. Oh, and some of these pumpkin stars measure up to 10 times larger than our own sun as well. So let's just put our collective positive energies together and really hope that one of these bad boys doesn't decide to go supernova near our planet anytime soon, because, well, we would probably either die an instant or slow, painful radioactive death.
This next one goes to show just how many dangers there are out in space and how much chaos can be caused when these dangers come into contact with Earth. This is a satellite image of a giant-sized crater in the Arizona desert. It's called the Barringer Crater and was created 50,000 years ago by a meteor. It's 3,900 feet in diameter and 560 feet deep. It was created with the exploding force of 2.5 million tons of TNT, which is about 150 times the force of the Hiroshima atomic blast. Just a little reminder that we're always on the verge of complete and utter destruction. So yeah, NASA really needs to get those meteor-destroying lasers made as fast as possible.
Next up, we have our inevitable doom, illustrated in a generated photo released by NASA showcasing the inevitable head-on collision of our own galaxy with a neighboring galaxy by the name of Andromeda. You might have heard of it. When this happens, it is predicted by NASA that our sun will be flung into a new region of the galaxy, leaving Earth and our entire solar system to become frigid, lifeless, and inhospitable. The event is scheduled to take place 4 billion years from now, and this information was discovered using the Hubble telescope, an extremely powerful satellite along with some extremely complicated data processing that I cannot even begin to understand because I am a YouTuber, not a rocket scientist working for NASA. Anyways, these scientists and astronomers have been able to track the trajectory of the Andromeda and the Milky Way galaxies as well as their speed, and it's looking like a head-on collision. One more thing, if you're one of those people who think 3's a crowd, you'll be happy to know that while the majority of the cataclysmic collision will solely be between Andromeda and our own Milky Way, there is a third party at play, the Triangulum Galaxy, which is actually racing against the Andromeda in an effort to merge with the Milky Way first. Everyone wants a piece of the Milky Way.
So what would you guess this satellite image is? Could it be an alien crop circle, an ancient geoglyph? Well, it turns out it's actually a Scientology property, Trementina Base. Now, why is this on a scary things list? What can I say? I just find Scientology really creepy, especially because we really don't know exactly what goes on behind closed doors, which is extra bad considering all the dark stuff that's actually come out about this cult over the years. The purpose of this property is actually pretty silly though. According to the Church of Scientology, this huge complex is used to house the works of L. Ron Hubbard. They store all his writings there, you know, to keep him safe from all the enemy forces that want to read his books, I guess. Some of his writing has also even been etched into steel tablets and buried here. Sure, all right.
Next up, we have the CW Leonis, a dying star surrounded by an orange cloud of carbon. Carbon being the baseline of all known life. The carbon cloud was created by the star's destruction, as its outermost layers were thrown into the vast expansion of space. And the carbon itself, found in the space dust making up the carbon cloud, was created through something called nuclear fission, which took place inside of the star's interior. Now, nuclear fission happens when neutron stars smash together, creating super heavy elements, heavier than anything you're gonna find on the periodic table. When the elements break down, they give birth to organic elements such as, in this case, carbon. This is an incredible discovery, as the CW Leonis is the closest carbon star to Earth, coming in at just 400 light years away. And the death of this star has given astronomers a chance to observe the interactions between a dying carbon star's magnetic field and its surroundings. It also shows us just how possible it is for the beginning stages of life to exist, further supporting the theory that we are not alone in this universe, and possibly not even in this galaxy.
Next up, we have a mysterious red lake. It all started when satellite images showed a lake in Iraq that was pure deep red. So naturally, everyone was like, what's going on with that lake? And to this day, we still don't know 100%. Well, one possibility is pollution. There could be industrial waste and chemicals, sewage, just contaminating the lake, turning it red. Factories sometimes dump their waste into nearby water, causing all sorts of strange changes in color. There could also be something natural going on. Certain types of algae or bacteria can bloom in water and have been known to create red pigments in the water. This is known as red tide. It's usually seen in the ocean, but it can happen in lakes and rivers as well. There could also be a concentration of iron-rich minerals in the water. These minerals can oxidize and create this rusty red color. There's also another rumor that there's a place where they kill animals close to the lake, and well, you know where I'm going with that. So these explanations, they do make sense, but the exact cause is still a mystery.
And finally, we have the discovery of hidden Egyptian pyramids. In 2011, using satellite images from NASA, Sarah Perrick from the University of Alabama at Birmingham discovered 17 new structures in the famous lost city of Tanis, Egypt, which turned out to be undiscovered ancient Egyptian pyramids. Along with the pyramids, Perrick also discovered 1,000 smaller tombs located within Egypt. Using the same method, satellites, Sarah went on to discover even more hidden archaeological sites around the world. She is now hoping to discover the lost civilization of Peru, and has even launched her own satellite program in 2016 called Global Explorer, that's XPLORER, to aid her in her search. The discovery of the pyramids and other ancient structures using satellite imaging has led scientists to the conclusion that, in regards to ancient ruins, we have only really found about 10% of what's actually out there. A pretty daunting and incredibly exciting fact. I just hope with this new technology we don't go unearthing ourselves any ancient curses. Fingers crossed, but I really still would like to see us find Cleopatra's tomb. So, fingers crossed with that too. Two astronauts, Sunny Williams and Barry Wilmore, are currently stuck in space with no clear timeline of when they will be returning home. In June, it was revealed that the two astronauts had become stranded on the ISS due to multiple malfunctions aboard the space station. On June 5th, the pair had gone up into space on Boeing human orbital spacecraft Starliner with the goal of spending just 8 days outside of our atmosphere, but unfortunately plans changed when a helium leak coupled with a failure in 5 of the Boeing's 28 reaction control system thrusters took place, leading to the pair becoming stuck on the space station with no way home. Recent updates have revealed that the Starliner is in no position to bring the astronauts back down to Earth, and so NASA is currently working on a backup plan that involves Elon Musk's SpaceX Dragon capsule, which was supposed to launch earlier this month, August 2024, but the launch has since been pushed back to September, as NASA is currently considering cutting 2 of the 4 astronauts aboard the Dragon capsule in order to make room for Sunny and Barry. However, a decision is yet to be made. Really hoping they figure this one out sooner rather than later, because the whole situation sounds really scary and kind of like a huge oversight.
The Soyuz 11 mission is one of the most tragic stories in space history. So in 1971, Georgy Dobrovolsky, Viktor Patsayev, and Vladislav Volkov became the first crew to successfully dock with and live aboard a space station, Salyut 1. This was a big deal at the time because living in space for an extended period was still a brand new and very exciting concept. Everything seemed to be going well. The team spent 23 days aboard Salyut 1 conducting experiments and sending back data to Earth, but as they prepared to return home, things took a turn. During re-entry, as they descended towards Earth, communication with the crew suddenly stopped. When rescue teams reached their landing site, they found that the craft looked totally fine from the outside, but when they knocked on the outside, there was no response. And when they opened the hatch, they found all 3 cosmonauts motionless inside the capsule. Patches of their skin had turned blue. They'd obviously suffocated. So a tiny valve had opened too early during re-entry, and the valve was supposed to open once they were safely back in Earth's atmosphere, but it opened prematurely, causing the cabin to depressurize. The crew had no spacesuits on at the time, so they couldn't survive the sudden loss of pressure. To date, this is the only case of humans actually dying in space.
The failed Apollo 1 NASA mission is arguably one of the most controversial missions in NASA's entire history, and that is saying something because in the past NASA has done quite a number of incredibly questionable things. While astronauts Gus Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Schaefer were not in space when the incident occurred, they were aboard the Apollo 1 rocket, which unfortunately never actually made it off the ground. While waiting in excited anticipation for their journey, which was supposed to end in the astronauts' safe return to Earth after having been the very first men to have ever stepped foot on the moon, a flash fire broke out inside the command module that was likely sparked by an electrical short that took place under one of the 3 astronauts' footrests. Because the capsule was filled with pure oxygen, it was highly combustible and the whole thing went up in flames within seconds. Unfortunately, the 3 men were unable to escape the burning spacecraft and perished inside. Of course, this led to extreme public outrage and a major demand for a reevaluation of NASA's safety protocols, which did occur, but as you can tell by many of the points on this list, they still have quite a lot of work to do.
Apollo 13 was supposed to be another routine mission to the moon, as routine as a mission to the moon can get anyway, but it quickly became one of the greatest survival stories in history. On board were astronauts Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes, who blasted off from Earth on April 11th of 1970. Everything was going smoothly until 2 days into the mission when an oxygen tank exploded. The explosion ruptured the service module, which was their main spacecraft, and left them with very little power. The lunar module, which was originally meant to land on the moon, suddenly became their lifeboat. It was the only part of the spacecraft that still worked and could provide life support. The crew and NASA had to figure out how to get these astronauts back to Earth using whatever they had left. There was a ton of improvisation and on-the-fly problem solving. They had to conserve power, so they turned off almost everything that wasn't absolutely necessary, leaving them freezing cold and struggling with low oxygen. They also had to manually adjust their trajectory to make sure they'd slingshot around the moon and head back to Earth. Meanwhile, NASA engineers on the ground scrambled to develop a plan to keep them alive and bring them home safely. And as insane and dire as this situation was, against all odds, the crew made it back, splashing down the Pacific Ocean on April 17th. And of course, as is tradition, Tom Hanks starred in the survival picture about this movie. I think he stars in like every survival biopic. Like, he just does tons of them. I'm not going to list them here because I can't think of them off the top of my head, but just list down below in the comments. I think we'll be able to come up with like 10.
In March of 1956, cosmonauts Alexei Leonov and Vladimir Komarov boarded the Vauxhall 2 and embarked on the first space mission to carry more than 1 crew member. And on March 18th, Alexei Leonov performed the first ever spacewalk, which was an amazing feat, but almost ended in Alexei becoming lost in space and subsequently dying of either exposure or asphyxiation. You see, when attempting to re-enter the Vauxhall 2 after his spacewalk, Alexei ran into a slight problem. His spacesuit had become filled with air, making it impossible for him to re-enter the spacecraft feet first, as intended, to ensure the safety of the astronaut. Luckily, his training had prepared him for all kinds of hazardous situations, and so he quickly came up with a plan that involved him slowly releasing the excess air from his spacesuit so that he would be able to enter the Vauxhall 2 too, although it was clear that feet first was no longer an option, and that he would have to enter the craft head-on in order to survive the ordeal. Oh, and if he didn't complete the task within the next 40 minutes, he would surely suffocate in the vacuum of space because his air was running out, and his body temperature was rising rapidly due to extortion. Luckily, he remained calm and was able to avoid disaster. Unfortunately, his partner, Vladimir Komarov, would not be so lucky in the years to come.
Vladimir Komarov was a Soviet cosmonaut set to pilot the Soyuz 1 mission in 1967. The mission was supposed to be a huge success for the Soviet Union, but Komarov was well aware that there were a number of technical problems with the spacecraft. He even reportedly told a close friend that he knew he wouldn't be coming back alive. But he chose to fly anyway, fearing that his backup, Yuri Gagarin, would be sent instead. Sure enough, as soon as Soyuz 1 launched, things started to go wrong. One of the solar panels failed to deploy, which meant the spacecraft didn't have enough power. Communication was spotty, and Komarov was left struggling to manually operate the spacecraft. Back on Earth, engineers were trying to come up with solutions, but the problems just kept piling up. Komarov stayed in orbit, isolated in a faulty spacecraft with very little hope of a safe return. But he stayed calm and collected as he could, trying to make the most of this very bad situation, but the whole time he must have been aware that his chances of survival were very slim. As Komarov attempted to return to Earth, the parachutes that were supposed to slow down the descent failed to deploy properly, and it tragically crashed, killing Komarov instantly.
On January 28th of 1986, NASA's Space Shuttle Challenger burst into flames no more than 75 seconds after takeoff, ending the lives of all 7 astronauts aboard the craft, including Krista McAuliffe, a school teacher who had joined the mission as part of the Teachers in Space project, with the hopes of filming educational videos in space, in the hopes that it might reignite American children's love of learning. At a height of about 46,000 feet and above the Atlantic Ocean, the Challenger practically disintegrated, while onlookers watched in horror as the fates of the astronauts became sealed inside of their airtight vessel. The incident later became quite the scandal, as after it occurred, NASA released a report stating that while the organization was unaware of what caused the accident, they were sure that the cabin crew would have been unconscious at the time of the explosion due to the cabin's pressure. A report that was later dismissed as a poor excuse for a cover-up attempt, when it was revealed that the crew was most likely fully awake and possibly fully aware of the fact that an explosion was about to take place. Furthermore, the Rogers Commission also revealed that NASA had not taken proper safety precautions prior to the mission. Not only that, but they also never received an engineer's stamp of approval declaring the spacecraft flight ready prior to the attempted launch. Again, a massive oversight.
The Space Shuttle Columbia was the oldest shuttle in NASA's fleet, and it had been on numerous successful missions before. On January 16th of 2003, it launched on its 28th mission with a crew of 7 astronauts. Rick Husband, William McCool, Michael Anderson, Elin Ramon, Kalpana Chawla, David Brown, and Laurel Clark. And during the launch, a piece of foam insulation broke off from the external fuel tank and hit the shuttle's left wing. Now, NASA knew about this foam strike but didn't realize the true extent of the damage. While the crew continued their work in space, engineers on the ground debated the severity of the situation, but no one fully grasped just how bad this really was. After 16 days in space, Columbia began its descent back to Earth on February 1st of 2003. As it re-entered the atmosphere, hot gases entered the shuttle through the damaged wing, causing it to snap right off. There was nothing the crew could do at that point. The shuttle just completely disintegrated over Texas and Louisiana.
Another near-death experience took place on October 16th of 1979 when cosmonauts Vyacheslav Zudov and Valery Rozhedestvensky attempted to re-enter Earth's atmosphere in Soviet spacecraft Soyuz 23. Unfortunately for the two men, strong winds caused the vessel to land 75 miles, 120 kilometers away from its targeted landing point. And to make matters even worse, the spacecraft landed in an icy lake. But wait, there's more. Almost immediately after touchdown, Soyuz 23's parachute, which had deployed to slow the spacecraft's descent, began taking on water, and subsequently dragging the Soyuz down towards the bottom of the lake as temperatures inside of the main capsule reached negative 17 degrees Celsius, 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Many failed rescue attempts were made, including an attempt to airlift the capsule, which was ultimately just too heavy. But eventually, the remaining pieces of Soyuz 23, including the main cabin containing the men, were dragged ashore, 11 hours after it had touched down on Earth. When rescuers opened the cosmonaut's hatch, Zudov was unconscious and frost had almost completely lined the interior of the vessel. Luckily, both astronauts did make a full recovery, but had they spent any longer in the icy waters of Russia, things could have been way worse.
The Apollo 12 mission was the second manned trip to the moon. It took place just a few months after Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin's Apollo 11 landing. This was a big deal because it was another chance to prove that landing on the moon wasn't just a one-time thing. Apollo 12 lifted off on November 14, 1969, with astronauts Charles Conrad, Richard Gordon, and Alan Bean on board. Right as the rocket was climbing into the sky, though, something pretty terrifying happened. It was struck by lightning. Not once, but 2 times. The first strike was even visible to the people watching from the ground, which would have been, a pretty incredible sight, but no doubt horrifying. Like, my God, what happens when lightning strikes a rocket? Well, luckily, in this case, everything was still working fine. The electrical systems rebooted, and they continued on with the mission. Once in space, the Apollo 12 team went on to land on the moon just like planned, but it was definitely not the smooth trip up that they'd been hoping for. As Pete Conrad famously stated, "That may have been a small one for Neil, but that's a long one for me." And the return to Earth wasn't easy either. When the spacecraft splashed down in the ocean, a big wave hit them. This jolt knocked a 16mm camera loose, and it hit astronaut Alan Bean on the head, giving him a pretty nasty cut. Thankfully, Pete Conrad jumped into action and patched Bean up right away.
Starting us off today, we have a never before seen deep space radio signal detected in 2023. The radio signal comes in the form of an FRB, a fast radio burst, which is a bright flash of radio light that lasts for only a few milliseconds before disappearing altogether. The fascinating thing about this particular radio burst is that 1, it comes from far beyond our own galaxy, and 2, it is highly active and frequently repeats itself, meaning its behavior is incredibly different from any other FRB observed to date. Sophia Scheik, lead author of the discovery, was quoted saying, "This work is exciting because it provides both confirmation of known FRB properties and the discovery of some new ones." The FRB was observed 35 times by Scheik and other scientists over a 2-month period, with each burst coming from the exact same unknown source. And an unusual pattern emerged in the bursts when observed for an extended period of time. Usually, reoccurring FRBs get lower in pitch as they go. This one, however, is different. The pitch goes up and down with each burst. Scientists believe the bursts are coming from a neutron star called magnetar, the core of a dead star with an incredibly strong magnetic field. And they're probably right, but on the other hand, perhaps it's a signal coming from beyond our cosmic simulation, proving that none of this is really real.
Next up, we have a very recently detected radio signal that has NASA scientists pretty confused. It's a repeating radio signal from deep space that cycles every 53.8 minutes. It's been dubbed ASKAP J1935 plus 2148. It's coming from a neutron star about 15,820 light years away. Neutron stars are incredibly dense remnants of massive stars that have collapsed in on themselves. According to Dr. Manisha Caleb, an astrophysicist involved in the study, what's strange about this discovery is the slow pace of the signal. Most radio signals from neutron stars are a lot more rapid. Astronomers used the Australian Square Kilometre Array Pathfinder, or the ASKAP radio telescope, to detect and study the signal. They found that it has 3 distinct emission states, each with its own set of characteristics. So, what is causing the strange behavior of the signal? Too soon to know.
Next up, we have the space roar. subtle, right? Now, as a general rule, there is no sound in space, but of course, when science, engineering, and mechanics all intertwine, we are still able to pick up sounds when using the right tools, which is exactly what happened in 2006 when scientists used a listening instrument tied to a balloon 23 miles high to pick up a signal that was 6 times louder than anything they could have ever expected. Like, honestly, they were shocked and confused, but overall incredibly excited. Before the transmission came through, scientists had expected to observe the sounds of an early star, but after hearing the transmission, an early star being the origin of the sound was pretty much entirely ruled out. Now the theory is that the combined radio emission from distant galaxies created the sound, but of course that's just a theory. In reality, scientists really have no idea. But not knowing the sound's origin is not the only problem the signal has raised. There is also the fear that the volume of the signal will interfere with efforts made to search for signals coming from the first stars that formed from the Big Bang. Of course, the obvious theory jumps out. Could the space roar be an attempt at keeping us from revealing the truth about the universe? Discovering that it's all just one big cosmic simulation, you know? Or is it yelling at us, begging us to look into it more, so we can discover that this is all just one big cosmic simulation?
The James Webb Telescope may just be able to spot intelligent life out in space, and not in the way you may be thinking. It has to do with greenhouse gases. So a recent study from the University of California, Riverside, suggests that we might detect alien civilizations by spotting the artificial greenhouse gases on their terraformed planets. Terraforming involves modifying a planet to make it habitable, and certain gases like fluorinated methane, ethane, and propane would be telltale signs that this was going on. These gases don't occur naturally in large amounts, but could be used by sentient life to warm up their planets. Edward Schweiderman, an astrobiologist leading the study, says, quote, "These gases would be good for a civilization that perhaps wanted to forestall an impending ice age or terraform an otherwise uninhabitable planet in their system, as humans have proposed for Mars." So the James Webb can detect the infrared signatures produced by these gases, which can survive in atmospheres for up to 50,000 years. So no, nothing's been spotted yet, but it is something they're keeping their eyes open for.
Next up, we've got the Southern Ring Nebula, which NASA has tricked the public into believing is the performance of a dying star, when in reality, it's clearly a rendering flaw in the simulation, giving us a glimpse into the world of our creators, or so they say. But if you want to believe NASA, here's what they have to say. The phenomena is caused by the dimmer dying star sitting in the center of the image, sending out rings of gas and dust in all directions, which it has been doing for the past couple thousand years, while the brighter star next to it illuminates the appearance of the nebula, making it incredibly beautiful and almost inviting, like you want to go through it. The event, which was observed almost head-on by the James Hubble telescope, has made scientists incredibly excited because the clarity of the image is a gateway to the secrets of the nature of dying stars. But I personally think it's a gateway into the real reality, and this image is really just the Matrix begging us to escape, but okay, NASA, alright.
James Webb Telescope recently spotted a series of star clusters that may very well completely change the way we think about the history of the universe. These star clusters could be the oldest in the universe. The star clusters were found in the cosmic gems arc, which formed just 460 million years after the Big Bang. This arc, originally detected by the Hubble Space Telescope, gives us a crucial glimpse into the early stages of galaxy and star formation. The cosmic gems arc is approximately 13.3 billion light years away, but with the Webb telescope, scientists were able to pinpoint 5 massive and dense star clusters within the arc. These clusters are believed to have formed during a period of intense activity in young galaxies, contributing to the ultraviolet light emissions of their host galaxy. Unlike ancient star clusters in our Milky Way, which have survived for billions of years, these young star clusters are giving scientists insights into the early stages of star formation, which is pretty interesting.
Alright, next up we have the Carina Nebula, basically the opposite of the aforementioned Southern Ring Nebula, which shows the death of a star. The Carina Nebula is a landscape of star birth, or at least that's what NASA wants you to think. Personally, I think it looks like the early stages of landscape rendering. I mean, we've been asking for life on other planets for some time now. Maybe whoever's controlling this cosmic simulation has finally started to listen. But of course, if that line of thinking doesn't quite sit right in your simulated brain designed to reject the idea that free will doesn't actually exist, let me tell you what NASA has to say. Apparently, according to the space agency, the Carina Nebula is not proof of simulation theory, but instead it's an emerging star nursery. And the image captured by the James Webb Space Telescope shows individual stars in the Carina Nebula that were previously obscured due to cosmic dust particles. Sure.
Next up we have unexplained light fluctuations coming from a star in the Cygnus constellation. Scientists still don't know what's causing it, but one theory is that there's an alien megastructure surrounding it. And that's not just an internet theory, that is something a number of scientists have proposed. It's often referred to as the Tabby star Dyson sphere theory. So the strange dimming was first spotted by citizen scientists throughout the Planet Hunters project using data from the Kepler Space Telescope. Tabby star showed extreme dimming, sometimes up to 22% in brightness. Now, there are tons of ideas about why this could be happening, but the alien megastructure is, I'm sure, most of what we want to hear. This hypothetical megastructure, known as the Dyson swarm or sphere, could have been built by an advanced extraterrestrial civilization to harness the star's energy. We really don't have any solid evidence of this at this point. It's just that possibility because of the constant dimming intermittently, but there are loads of possibilities.
Next up, we have Quasar 3C273, a supermassive black hole feeding on humongous quantities of gas located in the center of the giant elliptical galaxy in the constellation of Virgo. It is also the first quasar ever identified and the optically brightest quasar discovered to date. Quasar 3C273 is incredibly powerful, capable of emitting hundreds and possibly thousands of times more energy than the entire energy output of our own galaxy, the Milky Way. Which means it probably has enough energy to power the simulation of our Milky Way and the illusion of a surrounding universe. I'm just saying, when we're looking at Quasar 3C273, we could actually be looking at the computer that made us.
Finally, we have Bernardini-Bernstein, which is a really big comet that's been detected. Really, really big. In fact, it's called a megacomet. Stuff like this makes me kind of wish we were living in a simulation. Speaking of simulations, is it Bernardini-Bernstein or Bernstein? I don't know if anyone's gonna get that joke. But anyway, the thing is headed in our direction and will make its closest approach in 2031. Luckily, it'll pass us by about 1 billion miles, which is good because it's 100,000 times more massive than your average comet, measuring 85 miles across. Just a reminder how it's not really as empty up there as it looks most of the time.
Okay, I'm gonna keep it real, you guys. I've been around long enough, so we're friends now, and I know I'm not fooling anyone. So yeah, right now there is no significant threat of asteroids destroying the planet, black holes swallowing Earth, or solar flares engulfing us in flames. But I think it's safe to say that it's human nature to fear the unknown. So let's check out a few unknowns that even making sense of doesn't lend much clarity to. First on our list today, we have the South Atlantic anomaly, also known as the Bermuda Triangle of space, which, much like its eponym counterpart, has been responsible for many strange happenings as well as dangerous circumstances within its parameters. Now, while the reasonings behind the many disappearances of ships and planes within the Bermuda Triangle remain highly debated but ultimately unknown, the dangerous terrain of space's version has recently adopted itself a scientific explanation, which I will share with you now, the best that I can. So basically, surrounding Earth, there are two belts stacked on top of one another. The innermost is filled with high energy protons, and the outermost is made up of mainly electrons. These belts are held into place by Earth's magnetic field and play an extremely important role in protecting the Earth from particles shooting out from the surface of the sun, which can cause harmful radiation. Well, the thing is, at the point of the South Atlantic anomaly, the intensity density of the magnetic field holding the belts in their place decreases, leaving an area of extreme vulnerability to satellites, spacecrafts, and any other equipment. Basically, anything that passes through the region will experience extreme radiation to the point of some serious damage. Okay, this one's not so much dark as it is exciting. I bet you thought that Mars was the most likely planet to inhabit life, other than Earth of course. But if you thought that, you'd be wrong. Or maybe you'd be right, as the most likely place in which life exists within our solar system outside of our own planet isn't actually a planet. It's a moon. More specifically, Europa, one of Jupiter's largest moons. While the presence of oceans beneath its icy surface have been confirmed, it is predicted by scientists and astronomers that deeper still, the moon contains geothermal vents, providing heat to the waters and possibly playing host to thousands of life forms. Some other cool things about Europa is that not only is it covered in oceans, but its waters act incredibly similarly to our own, producing 10 times more oxygen than hydrogen, which combined with all of the other factors in which we have just discussed, make the existence of life on this planet extremely scientifically promising. What do you guys think? Could this be the first case of real aliens coming to us in the form of single-celled organisms? And next on the list we have Lovejoy, the alcoholic comet that wanted a drink so bad it made its own. Not like at the bar, but it literally made its own alcohol, cosmically. Thought to be nothing more than just a regular comet glowing white hot, leaving behind a trail of space dust, Lovejoy has proved itself to be a whole lot more when in 2015 it decided to do a quick fly by the sun. When this happened, the 250-meter comet began doing something that had, until then, never been seen before. It began spewing alcohol at a rate that would satisfy an entire campus of frat houses. It is estimated that the comet released ethyl alcohol at a rate of 500 bottles of wine per second. Now this is already super cool, but it does get cooler, because all jokes aside, along with the ethyl alcohol, the comet also produced large amounts of sugar as well as organic molecules, which, when you mix them all together, are the building blocks of DNA. Another instance in which we are possibly witnessing the beginning stages of life beyond the barriers of our own earthly existence. Moving on from C2H5, the chemical formula for ethyl alcohol, we have CO2. Not ours though, as scientists have recently discovered a large presence of carbon dioxide as well as methane gas and water vapor outside of our own solar system surrounding K2-18b, an exoplanet that is 8.6 times the size of our Earth. So what makes this interesting? This is the first time CO2 has been discovered outside of our solar system. Just another indication that we really don't know all that much about what goes on within the vastness of space. The planet, as well as the presence of gases and liquids, was not technically discovered by a satellite, rather a space telescope orbiting the sun 1 million miles away from Earth. So close enough. This discovery not only shows how powerful this piece of technology is, but yet another possible life-bearing planet, as the presence of methane and CO2 and water are also all potential indications of such existence. At the halfway point, we are keeping it light with the discovery of Pluto's slug? A slug-shaped object making its way across the planet's icy surface known as the Sputnik planum. The surface, not the object, they just call that Pluto's slug. Okay, now that you're all caught up, it's time for me to break the news. What looks like a giant slug making its way through the tundras of Pluto's frozen wastelands has actually been determined to be nothing more than an iceberg. Well, kind of. Rather, it's a floating block of water sitting on top of and sliding its way through the denser solid nitrogen which surrounds it. Not scary, but pretty cool. And there's some pretty neat stuff going on in this area that has nothing to do with the so-called slug as well. You may notice in the photographs, Sputnik planum is covered in little bumps and ridges all across its surface, and that's because this particular area on Pluto is almost acting as a giant icy lava lamp. An oxymoron, I know, but hear me out. The ice on Pluto's surface is super nitrogen heavy, and Pluto's surface generates heat. That heat pushes the ice up, but when it cools, it sinks down to warm up again, up and down, thus creating the bumpy ridges that decorate the planum plains. So that was cool, but let's get back on track, because next up we have the cosmic keyhole, perhaps one of the most perplexing nebulas discovered to date. Beautiful, yes. Stunning, yes. Understandable, not at all. The cosmic keyhole is a reflection nebula, meaning it's part of debris left behind from the cataclysmic event of star formation. Like a cloud of dust surrounding a street lamp, reflection nebula are lit up by the bright star whose creation gave way to their existence. While reflection nebula are normal and common spectacles throughout countless galaxies, this one is strange, and you can probably guess why. It's the massive amount of empty space directly at its center. At first, scientists believed this to be a Bok globule, which is a freezing cold, dense cloud of gas, molecules, and cosmic dust that blocks out background light, but they have since realized that it's not the case. In fact, the keyhole is something entirely different. It's actually nothing at all. The dark patch observed is nothing more than a completely empty region of space, never seen before, unexplainable, and incredibly bizarre. Now, I was going to mention black holes, but let's be honest, if you wanted to learn more about those, you'd be watching one of our many other videos specifically dedicated to the subject. Today, we're keeping it fresh, light, and light years away. Well, I'm lying again, because next up we have asteroid 2023 TK15, which passed by Earth at a distance of not light years, but in fact a distance closer to that of our very own moon, making it the closest a space rock of this magnitude has ever been to the surface of Earth, well, since, you know, the whole dinosaur thing. Too soon? Okay, the passing took place on Friday, October 20th of 2023, and absolutely nothing happened. Well, no, it was an incredible astronomical event that gave both scientists, astronomers, and all asteroid enthusiasts a lot to talk about at dinner parties. And hey, once again, we've survived the end of the world. Starting off our top 3, we have the totally not at all terrifying magnetic explosions. Cool. So I'll put it to you this way. It happens every day, probably multiple times a day, and nothing happens. Well, something does happen, but I'll tell you in a bit. First, let me explain exactly what a magnetic explosion is. So, the Earth is surrounded by a magnetic field, which protects it from all kinds of things, as we discussed earlier, and it's called the magnetosphere. The Sun has something called solar winds, which are basically just a stream of charged particles that flow out from its fiery surface. When the solar winds, which contain their own magnetic energy, push against Earth's magnetic field, they tangle, until eventually they don't. And they come out of it by snapping back and realigning themselves. And that action is what causes the magnetic explosion. Good news, nothing bad happens to us. Great news, something really cool happens. While the explosion is not visible to the naked eye, its effects are, as when the explosion happens, they tend to send tiny particles into our atmosphere, which manifest as none other than the auroras, of which there are actually at least 27, and the most popular is Aurora Borealis, commonly known as the Northern Lights. Next up, we have the Traveler. Not an alien, again, that's another video, but it is out of this world. And not just out of this world, but out of this solar system. And before it too. The foreign object was discovered on October 19th in 2007 and obviously was something no one had ever seen before. It was originally believed to be a comet, but that was incorrect, as it did not exhibit any behavior that would classify it as such. It was determined to be a space rock that had found its origins in a solar system completely separate from our own, and that had been roaming the cosmos for long before our own system's creation too. Not much else is known about the object, other than it's currently in our solar system, but it does continue to be monitored. Oh, and it has a name too, O Mau Mau, which is a Hawaiian term meaning a messenger from afar arriving first. So what do you think? Is it a sign that the floodgates have opened for objects from outside solar systems to begin encroaching on our own? Let me know. And finally, we have Hell Planet. No, not this planet. This planet, also known as Exoplanet 55 Cancri E. This planet, which resides 40 light years away outside of our own solar system and hopefully plans on staying there, has a mass of about 8.36 times that of Earth and a diameter of about twice the size. It's pretty big. But wait, there's more, because it's also on fire. And not only that, but it's mostly made up of diamonds. There's a lot going on. The planet is obviously uninhabitable for many reasons, among them being the fact that this planet's temperatures range from anywhere between 4,200 degrees to 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit, 1,400 to 1,300 degrees Celsius. The highest temperatures are reached on the side of the planet which exists in perpetual daylight due to the way the planet orbits around its sun, but even the lowest temperatures which occur on its dark side are still unfathomably hot. Count me out of this SpaceX journey.
This was the last piece of audio taken from the soon-to-be crew of the Apollo 1 when a fire broke out, killing all 3 men. Just a heads up, this audio is pretty distressing. On January 27, 1967, the soon-to-be crew of the Apollo 1, Ed White, Roger Chaffee, and Gus Grissom were in the middle of a launch simulation. But things went terribly wrong, all thanks to an exposed wire. This test was crucial for preparing for their upcoming mission. They were fully suited up, strapped in, running through their checklist when Grissom noticed a strange smell. There was a brief hold in the countdown, but they couldn't pinpoint the source. They resumed their countdown, but just a few minutes later, a fire broke out. The astronauts' frantic voices were heard over the comm. Ed White yelled, "Fire!" Now, because of the design of the command module and the pure oxygen atmosphere, the flames spread incredibly fast. Ground crews rushed to help, but the thick smoke and toxic gases made it nearly impossible to reach the crew. It took several hours to recover their bodies, which were trapped in the melted materials. Uh-oh. 2 words you never want to hear during spaceflight. On January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger launched from Kennedy Space Center at 11:38 a.m. It all seemed normal at first, but just 58 seconds into the flight, things took a turn. 9 puffs of smoke were spotted coming from the right solid rocket booster. The problem was that the cold temperatures had messed with the O-rings, which were supposed to seal the joints, and this allowed hot gas to escape, causing serious damage. As the shuttle continued its ascent, a flame broke through the joint of the booster. The crew, unaware of the situation, received a command to go at throttle up. Commander Francis Scobie responded with "Roger" at throttle up. That was the last communication from Challenger. Just moments later, the right booster detached from the shuttle. Pilot Mike Smith's last recorded words were simply, "Uh-oh." The shuttle began to break apart in a catastrophic explosion, scattering debris over the Atlantic Ocean at an altitude of 46,000 feet. The crew cabin, which stayed intact at first, experienced extreme forces during the breakup. Investigations later revealed that some crew members might have actually been conscious after the explosion, as personal oxygen packs had been activated. Rick Husband, the captain aboard the Columbia Space Shuttle, was in communication with ground control during re-entry. The last message they received from him was, quote, "Roger," before he was cut off. The Columbia disaster is one of the darkest moments in NASA's history. On February 1st of 2003, Columbia was set to re-enter the atmosphere after a successful mission. The crew, including 7 astronauts, was busy preparing for landing as the entry flight control team took their positions at mission control early that morning. Everything was going as planned until about 8:44 a.m. when Columbia re-entered the atmosphere at a staggering speed. Unfortunately, the shuttle had sustained damage to its thermal protection system during launch. This damage allowed superheated air to enter the left wing, which began melting the aluminum structure inside. As the shuttle continued to descend, the crew didn't notice that the left wing was losing control because of increased drag, and around 8:53 a.m. things started to go wrong. The shuttle shed pieces of debris, which ground observers saw as these bright flashes in the sky. By 8:58 a.m. the shuttle systems began reporting failures, and just moments later, at 8:59:32 exactly, the communication with Columbia was cut off. What followed was catastrophic. The shuttle broke apart in the atmosphere. All 7 crew members lost their lives. Investigations revealed that the crew had likely experienced a quick depressurization before they could take any protective measures. Houston, we've had a problem. No, I am not misquoting Jim Lovell there. This one is often misquoted, mainly because of the Apollo 13 movie. Apollo 13 is one of the most famous space missions, but not for the reasons everyone was hoping. It was launched on April 11th, 1970. And it started off on track, but about 56 hours into the mission, astronaut Jack Swigert switched on some fans in the oxygen tanks to get better pressure readings, and suddenly there was this loud bang, and power began to flicker, and that's when Swigert calmly reported, "Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here." Fellow astronaut Jim Lovell then repeated this, saying, "Houston, we've had a problem. We've had a main B bus undervolt," whatever that means, and this problem just escalated quickly. The crew realized they were losing oxygen and their power supply was failing. With 2 of their fuel cells out, they were in serious trouble, and the mission's goal shifted from landing on the moon to just getting everyone home alive. And the lunar module, Aquarius, became their lifeboat. They powered it up to preserve the little oxygen and electricity that they had left. As the crew was looping around the moon, NASA engineers worked frantically to kind of find solutions. It was a race against time, but miraculously the astronauts did make it back to Earth on April 17, 1970, splashing down in the South Pacific. In 2003, Yang Liwei, the first Chinese astronaut ever to reach space during the Shenzhou 5 mission, reported this eerie knocking sound on his spaceship. While floating in the silence of space, he started hearing something unsettling, an eerie knocking sound. He described it as, quote, "someone knocking on the body of the spaceship, just like hitting an iron bucket with a wooden hammer." He went on to report that it neither came from outside nor inside the spaceship. He couldn't figure out where the sound was coming from. Curious and understandably a little freaked out, Yang peeked out of the porthole, hoping to figure out what was making this noise, but there was nothing. After returning to Earth, he even tried to recreate the sound, but there was no luck there either. I've always found this case very compelling, just the idea of floating around in space all alone and then hearing something you can't explain. That'd be terrifying. So what, or maybe even who, was knocking on the spacecraft? You'd think space would be silent since sound needs a medium to travel, like air or water. And some experts have said that if it was a knocking sound, something physical might have been hitting the spacecraft. As for what that may have been, who knows? Thank you. Tell everyone it happened. This was the last garbled message sent by astronaut Vladimir Komarov, who perished during the Soyuz 1 mission. On April 23, 1967, the Soviet Soyuz spacecraft was launched, carrying cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov. Things went wrong almost immediately. One of the solar panels failed to unfold, which meant there wasn't enough power for the spacecraft systems. By the time the capsule had completed 13 orbits, the automatic stabilization system was completely out, leaving the manual controls only partially working. And meanwhile, the crew of the Soyuz 2 was preparing for a rescue mission, planning to fix the solar panel, but thunderstorms at the launch site forced them to abort. Mission Control decided to bring Komarov back home after 18 orbits. As the capsule re-entered Earth's atmosphere though, Komarov communicated that everything seemed fine, stating the engine was running for 146 seconds. "Everything is going fine," quote. But then the main parachute failed to deploy. Komarov tried to activate a reserve chute, but that got tangled. The descent module crashed down at around 140 kilometers per hour. Rescue teams arrived to find the capsule on its side, engulfed in flames, with molten metal dripping from it. It was clear that Komarov did not survive. "They're on the moon watching us." These words were supposedly spoken by Neil Armstrong during his walk on the moon. Neil Armstrong made history when he walked on the moon. Of course, there are loads of conspiracy theories surrounding the moonwalk now, but here's one I hadn't ever heard of until today. After Armstrong landed, NASA supposedly lost transmission for about 2 minutes, and during this blackout, Armstrong allegedly sent a secret message saying, "These babies were huge, sir, enormous. Oh God, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecraft out here, lined up on the far side of the crater's edge. They're on the moon, watching us." I don't know, this one's definitely dubious and it's hard to find other information about it, but hey, if he really did see some strange stuff up there, that would definitely be really cool. The 3 men aboard the Soyuz 11 remain the only astronauts ever to die while still in space. The mission was launched on June 6th of 1971, aiming to dock with the Salyut space station. The docking process was complex and took over 3 hours, and their mission lasted 22 days, during which time they carried out scientific experiments and live broadcasts. It was far from smooth sailing though. On day 11, a fire broke out in the station, which they fortunately managed to put out. On June 29th, the crew prepared for their return to Earth. Cosmonaut Vladislav Volkov joked with ground control to make sure they had cognac waiting for them down below. This would unfortunately be one of the last messages flight controllers received though. Soon after undocking from Salyut 1, radio communication went silent. When the capsule landed, rescue teams rushed to check on the crew, and unfortunately, they found all three cosmonauts, Georgy Dobrovolsky, Viktor Patsayev, and Vladislav Volkov, dead in their seats. It turned out that a ventilation valve had opened during the separation, causing a rapid loss of cabin pressure. This was fatal in less than a minute. The autopsies revealed that they died from asphyxiation and hemorrhaging caused by the vacuum environment. You hear that? That whistling sound? Now, this quote from astronaut Gene Cernan may not be as disturbing as the others on this list. Not really disturbing at all, to be honest, but take a listen to what he's describing. This is audio from the Apollo 10 mission in 1969. Cernan was piloting the lunar module and described an odd whistling sound he was hearing to fellow astronauts John Young and Thomas Stafford. They sound pretty calm and content there. I would have been incredibly freaked out. You're already in space, now you're hearing a weird whistling noise. Is there something wrong with the ship? Is there an alien floating around? I don't know. I'd be pretty freaked out. Shoe leather. That's a quote from astronaut Alan Bean. Not all that terrifying on its own, but shoe leather was the description Bean gave about an odd shiny thing he spotted on the surface of the moon while in space. He had no idea what it was then, and still has no idea today. Neither does anyone else, but you can be damn sure there are some eerie conspiracy theories, mainly that it could be some remnant of alien technology. Are there more mundane explanations? Sure, but you're not really here for those now, are you? Now, this list has been pretty dark, so I thought I'd close out with another quote from Alan Bean, who passed away in 2018, but spent a lot of his final years painting and reminiscing about the incredible experiences he had as an astronaut. Alan Bean left something behind on the moon during the Apollo 12 mission in 1969. His silver astronaut lapel pin. In the years after the mission, he'd think about that pin often, saying, quote, "When I look at the moon at night, think about that pin up there, just as shiny as it ever was, and someday, maybe somebody will go pick it up."
The Black Knight satellite, that's a fun one. It's an ancient alien probe orbiting Earth, maybe.
Has it been sent from the future? What is it? Where is it from? And why is it here?
Let's find out. A mysterious object orbiting Earth above our atmosphere, man-made with no earthly origins. It's the Black Knight satellite, an alien surveillance device used to monitor Earth for the past 13,000 years, or so they say. The device was first detected by Nikola Tesla in 1899 and then by Marconi and Jorgen Hals a few years later, and it was confirmed in the early 20th century by amateur radio operators, and it was first reported in the news in the late 1950s and early 1960s. Apparently, the satellite is not only a monitoring device deployed by aliens to observe the going-ons of Earth, but supposedly, based on radio signals coming from the contraption, it also contains a map to a faraway planet called Epsilon Bootis. Nice. While some skeptics have claimed the object to be nothing more than just a piece of old space junk, it should be noted that space junk doesn't exhibit many of the properties exhibited by the Black Knight satellite, especially sending out distinguishable and decodable radio signals.
This next question that's probably on your mind is, why is it here? And if you're not so sold on the alien thing, well, where could it be from then? Well, there are tons of possibilities, from something as boring as space junk, which is what NASA claims, to more outlandish but interesting ideas like a time capsule from the future. This idea is very Star Trek-y, but let's just imagine, if you will, for a moment that our future selves, hundreds or even thousands of years from now, have figured out how to send messages or artifacts back in time. Well, maybe the Black Knight satellite is one of these time capsules. Perhaps it could be carrying important info or advanced technology that could help us in the very near future. Maybe it has the solution to climate change, or a cure for some major disease that's coming in the very near future, or new energy sources. If we could crack the code, who knows how much it could boost our progress? What if the satellite is more like a history book, preserving our achievements and mistakes for future generations? This way, even if a disaster strikes, our story wouldn't be lost forever. The idea is kinda like sending a message in a bottle, of course, just way more high tech. And yeah, there's no real proof of this, but If things did get crappy enough in the distant future that we decided we needed to change the course of history, I mean, why wouldn't we try to send some kind of signal back in time if we had the ability to do so?
As I mentioned, the object was first discovered by Nikola Tesla, the inventor of the Tesla coil, in 1899 in Colorado Springs. Tesla had built a large tower to see if he could detect any going-ons in the atmosphere, and he did. Kind of. When the tower first began receiving transmissions, composed of numbers at regular intervals, he assumed that they were coming from the atmosphere. But it didn't take him long to realize that they were actually coming from above our atmosphere in space. He was quoted in a local paper saying, "I believe numbers are being used for communication because numbers are universal." A few years later, Marconi, the inventor of the wireless radio, intercepted the same signals, and a few years after that, a Norwegian engineer observed something as well. Jorgen Hals noticed that the transmissions coming from the object sent out on a certain wavelength were somehow being sent back to where they originated from a few seconds later, which isn't that weird. I mean, radio echoes aren't unheard of, but what was weird was the timing. You see, generally radio echoes are consistent and take place just a few seconds after the original signal hits its destination, but these ones were different. They were inconsistent, and some took up to 15 seconds to bounce back. The signals became known as long delayed echoes, or LDE, a phenomenon observed many times over the years that is still yet to be explained.
So in 1973, Scottish researcher and author Duncan Lunnon claimed to have discovered messages from a supposed alien probe. Lunnon analyzed those long-delayed radio echoes, which are strange signals bouncing back to Earth with that delay, and he thought these echoes contained a hidden message from an extraterrestrial probe orbiting Earth, the Black Knight. Lunnon's theory was that the satellite was sending a star map, pinpointing the Epsilon Bootis star system, and according to him, this message was from an alien civilization trying to communicate with us. According to him, the message went as follows. Start here. Our home is in Epsilon Bootis, which is a double star. We live on the 6th planet of 7 coming from the Sun, which is the larger of the two. Our 6th planet has 1 moon. Our 4th planet has 3. Our 1st and 3rd planets each have 1. Our probe is in the position of Arcturus, known in our maps.
So, a couple of guys found some irregular radio signals coming from space. So what? Well, this what? On May 14th of 1954, 3 years prior to Sputnik becoming the first satellite in orbit, newspapers received a story from Major Donald Keyhole, a Marine Corps major, naval aviator, and future founder of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomenon, or NICAP. Keyhole told the papers that there were already 1 or possibly even 2 non-organic satellites already orbiting Earth. After the story broke, a group of government scientists began attempting to track the objects, when they came across radio signals that matched the description of the ones Tesla had found back in 1899. After that, NASA located the signal and France confirmed it. Years later, after Sputnik's deployment, the US began to worry if the signals might have been coming from a Russian spy satellite, but in 1957 that theory was disproved when a researcher from Venezuela noticed a mysterious object while observing Sputnik in its prograde orbit, west to east, along with the rotation of the Earth. This object was orbiting in retrograde, east to west, opposite the rotation of the Earth, which was technology that hadn't been invented yet, leading them to believe it must not have been made on Earth.
So this is said to be the first photographic evidence of the Black Knight, captured in 1998 during the STS-88 mission. It's a pretty fantastic image, not just because it's breathtaking, which it absolutely is, but because of how clear it is. There's an object floating through space here, clear as day. STS-88 was NASA's first space shuttle mission to the International Space Station. During the mission, astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour captured a series of photographs that some believe show the mysterious Black Knight satellite. Now, a lot of people were very excited when these photos were released. Just what the hell was this thing? Were we really looking at a genuine UFO? Well, NASA kinda crashed the party. They just said the object was a thermal blanket that had come loose during a spacewalk, and sure, this was a letdown to some. To others, it didn't change anything. To people who believe in the satellite's mysterious origins, the thermal blanket story is just another cover-up.
Here's another. Of course, when it comes to the subject of an alien satellite that the general public has not yet been made explicitly aware of, there is obviously going to be a number of cover-ups involved. In this case, the cover-up of the research conducted by and presented to the Observatory of Paris by Jacques Vallée, who is still alive today and still incredibly passionate about the subject of the Black Knight satellite. Over the course of his career, Jacques observed, tracked, photographed, and even filmed the massive 15-ton satellite that, at the time, no rocket on Earth would have been able to deploy. When he was satisfied with the amount of evidence he had gathered, he presented his findings to the observatory for publishing. In response to his presentation, the observatory promptly confiscated his files, erased all of his photos, and destroyed his tapes. Their reason? They were embarrassed because they could not definitively say what the object was, nor could they source its exact origin. I smell BS.
That was me, by the way. I gotta hit the bathroom after this. So dumb. What if the Black Knight isn't from the future at all, but the exact opposite, the distant past, launched by our ancient ancestors using advanced technology, a lost civilization like Atlantis or some other unknown empire that had tech as good as or even better than ours? They might have sent the object up for all sorts of reasons, but the one that's most intriguing to me is that the Black Knight satellite could be a sort of time capsule containing sacred artifacts or even DNA from a highly advanced ancient civilization that knew it was on the decline, or maybe they encoded messages in it to warn future generations about their mistakes to prevent suffering the same fate down the line. Yeah, I get it, sounds like a great plot for a movie, but completely improbable. Improbable, sure, but not impossible. History may have many more secrets than we know.
If you're still not convinced about the existence of the Black Knight satellite, you should know that in 1963, an Air Force test and fighter pilot and astronaut, along with NASA ground crew and tracking stations, actually saw, documented, and reported it during a space mission, only to quickly rescind the claim and instead cover up the fact that the object ever existed. In 1963, Gordon Cooper, an experienced pilot, became one of the first astronauts to go to space. In April of that year, he boarded the Mercury 9, and shortly after, he was living his anti-gravity dreams over 6,214 miles above the Earth's surface. During his descent back down to Earth, the landing module suffered from a total systems failure, but luckily, Gordon was able to land the spacecraft manually just 4 miles off target. That's pretty impressive. But believe it or not, that was not actually the most interesting thing to happen on the mission. While in space, Gordon had seen a green glowing object that ground crew and tracking stations confirmed. Not only that, but the object appeared to have been orbiting the Earth in retrograde, east to west. Unheard of technology at the time. NBC News picked up the story, but by the time Gordon made it back to Earth, the press was restricted from asking any questions about what he had seen, and NASA had released a statement claiming that an electrical malfunction had caused high levels of carbon dioxide in the ship's compartment, and that Gordon had hallucinated the whole thing. For years, Cooper went along with the narrative, that is, until he retired and decided to spill the tea. He claimed that what he and the ground crew saw during the Mercury 9 mission was in fact real, and not only that, but during his time working for the Air Force, he had witnessed hundreds of saucer-shaped spacecrafts being tested on military bases. I guess loyalty to liars in government can only last for so long.
Now, I'm sure we'd all love to believe that the Black Knight is something cool, like an object sent from the future or an alien probe as discussed before, or even a mundane thing like a piece of space junk if you're more nervous about that sort of thing. But could there be something more nefarious going on? Always, right? Maybe it's part of some secret government project. I mean, think about it. During the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union were in a high-stakes race for technological and military superiority. It's entirely possible that one of these countries, or even another government, could have launched a covert satellite. And yes, as Hannah mentioned, it was supposedly first spotted long before the Cold War, but most of the attention to the Black Knight came in the 50s and 60s, so who knows if something else had been detected in the years prior. If the Black Knight is a government project, it could be used for all sorts of secret missions. It might be collecting intelligence, it could be monitoring communications, or even conducting space experiments that the public doesn't know about. Governments often keep advanced technology under wraps, and the Black Knight could be one of these hidden tools. This idea is definitely a much more down-to-earth explanation compared to time capsules or ancient tech, so I mean, who knows? Aside from space junk, this may be the next most possible explanation.
Recent images produced by the James Webb Telescope provided scientists with some incredibly valuable insight about what truly lies beyond our galaxy. In 2022, NASA, in partnership with international space agencies, were finally able to begin observing a much larger chunk of the universe through the use of the world's most powerful space observatory. The never-before-seen aspects revealed by the James Webb Telescope are both absolutely stunning and incredibly humbling, as they show the true nature of the vast expansion of space and emphasize just how small we truly are in comparison to the rest of the universe. Some of the first images revealed a massive group of galaxy clusters that acts like a magnifying glass for the objects behind them in a phenomenon called gravitational lensing, which allowed the telescope to get a more in-depth look at incredibly old and faint faraway galaxies. Other images include the Pillars of Creation, located 6,500 light-years away in the Eagle Nebula. Then there's the Southern Ring Nebula, Stephan's Quintet, the Carina Nebula, and this incredibly mesmerizing Cartwheel Galaxy. All of the images are absolutely breathtaking and incredibly exciting, especially when it comes to truly understanding the secrets of our universe. Also in 2022 was the discovery that we are actually far more prepared to protect the Earth from potential asteroid strikes than previously thought. In late September of 2022, NASA successfully completed the first ever test mission for planetary defense after purposefully slamming a spacecraft into an asteroid called Dimorphos orbiting a larger space rock called Didymos. The double asteroid redirection test, also known as DART for short, was luckily a complete success and not a complete waste of money like a large number of NASA's previous endeavors. The collision of the spacecraft with Dimorphos significantly changed the asteroid's trajectory and the future of Earth's defense protocols in regards to incoming objects from space with the potential to cause damage to Earth. As even though neither Dimorphos or Didymos were of any threat to Earth at this current moment in time, the same technology and methods could be employed to protect against a real asteroid strike at a later date. Another revelation scientists were not expecting came to light last year in 2023 and turned our understanding of Earth's moon completely on its head. Why? Well, because according to recent findings, the moon may very well be at least 40 million years older than was previously thought. Last year, after examining small impact crystals known as Zircon crystals found within lunar rock samples obtained during NASA's Apollo 17 mission to the moon, created by the massive collision between Earth and a Mars-sized planet that eventually led to the formation of our moon, scientists noticed that some of the crystals found were much older than others collected from the surface of the moon, and in some cases 40 million years older. The discovery has the power to change our entire understanding of Earth's evolutionary timeline. So our moon is old. That's nothing to worry about, right? Right. But the fact that it's shedding might be. Okay, maybe shedding isn't the right word, but there's definitely something going on because recently scientists discovered an incredibly close to Earth object that they now think is likely a chunk of our moon. The object was first discovered in 2016, but scientists really didn't know what it was until later in 2021, when analysis revealed that the object's composition was incredibly similar to the composition of our moon. There were two things that prompted scientists to look into the object. One, it's so close to Earth that it almost appears to orbit Earth, although its actual orbital partner is the Sun. And two, it is projected to stay close to Earth for the next couple million years, which is strange because most near-Earth objects move on after about a decade. The distinction that the object is likely a lunar chunk came after they discovered that light emitted from and absorbed by this object showed clear signs that it was likely made of moon rock that likely broke off from our lunar body after the moon was hit by a passing asteroid. Scary and fascinating. Speaking of moons, in 2023, scientists confirmed the presence of 12 new moons orbiting Jupiter, bringing the planet's natural satellite count all the way up to 29, which is a whopping 28 more moons than we have here on Earth. While the moons were originally discovered in 2021 and 2022, it took until 2023 to confirm their presence. These new moons are small, ranging from just 0.6 to 2 miles, 1 to 3.2 kilometers wide, and most of them have incredibly wide orbits, with 9 of the newly discovered 12 taking more than 550 days to orbit around the circumference of Jupiter. Jupiter, the 5th planet from the Sun, only 2 behind Earth, is known not just for its moons, but also its stripy appearance caused by differences in the chemical composition and temperature of its atmospheric gases, and its giant red spot, cause unknown. Now, while the discovery of new moons orbiting Jupiter Jupiter is fascinating, what really has scientists excited is what they discovered on two of Jupiter's previously known moons, Ganymede and Io. Starting with Io, the innermost of Jupiter's moons. Recent discoveries revealed that this particular moon is a crazy hotbed of geological activity. I'm talking about volcanoes with towering mountains, vast lava plains, and highly active eruptive centers. Observations through the James Webb Telescope's advanced instruments allowed scientist Amike de Pater and her colleagues to get a better look at the discovery, which they are particularly excited about because getting to view these volcanoes, and even the eruption of one, Loki Patera, in November of 2022, has allowed them to further understand the dynamics of Jupiter's volcanism and its complex atmosphere. So, if Io is a hotbed for volcanic activity, then what does that make Ganymede? Well, technically the two have no influence over one another, but segues are hard sometimes. The real question here is actually what makes Ganymede so special. For starters, it's the only moon known to have its own magnetic field, which causes auras, ribbons of glowing hot electrified gas, in regions circling the north and south poles of this moon. The planet could possibly also have the perfect conditions for the development of extraterrestrial life. You see, a 2024 study done on the surface of this moon indicated that Ganymede's icy rocky sea bottom might very well be in contact with salt water, an interaction which scientists believe is key for the development of life. Fast forward to 2022 and scientists have detected the first signs of hydrogen peroxide on Ganymede, a discovery which has only furthered their belief that Ganymede is a hotbed for geological activity and that life on this moon could very well exist hidden beneath its icy surface. Alright, let's step away from the growing excitement of Jupiter's moons for a second and talk about the fact that Mercury is literally shrinking. You know, the planet known for being closest to the sun with the fastest orbit and shortest year of all the planets in our solar system, coming in at just 88 days. My god, could you imagine if a year was just 88 days? I mean, they go by fast enough as it is. Anyways, in 2023, scientists discovered that the solar system's smallest planet might actually be getting even smaller. Giant cracks called scarps found on the planet's surface are believed to have been created as the planet shrunk over long periods of cooling. While scientists originally predicted the scarps to be billions of years old, new evidence has revealed that some of them were no more than just 300 million years old, which suggests that the planet didn't actually stop shrinking a couple billion years ago and that it might be continuing to shrink to this day. Another shocking revelation was discovered on Venus, the second closest planet to the sun, the sixth largest, and the absolute hottest planet in our solar system, named after the goddess of love. You know what else is cool about Venus? Oxygen. That's right, in 2022, scientists were actually able to detect oxygen in Venus's atmosphere for the second time ever in recorded history. Not regular oxygen though, molecular oxygen, which is made up of unbounded oxygen atoms. It was spotted by NASA's Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy, a telescope attached to a large plane. Not a rocket, a plane that actually flies above the majority of interference from Earth's atmosphere in order to detect anomalies on other planets. How they used a telescope to detect oxygen is unfortunately beyond my scope of knowledge. Also unfortunate, the presence of oxygen on Venus does not point to signs of life, but rather a reaction in which solar radiation breaks down carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide in the atmosphere to form molecular oxygen, which is essentially useless because it's not breathable, but it's still a pretty cool find. Moving on to Mars, the fourth planet from the sun sitting directly behind the Earth, named by the Romans after their god of war because of its reddish color. Well, Mars is speeding up, not in terms of orbit, but its personal rotation, aka its spin, and scientists really don't know why. Data collected in 2023 during NASA's InSight mission revealed that Mars's rotation is actually accelerating at a rate of 4 milliseconds per year. What I'm saying is it's getting faster, and subsequently its days are getting shorter. There are two theories here for why this might be happening. One, a buildup of ice at the planet's two poles are causing mass distribution discrepancies, and two, post-glacial rebound, which is a phenomenon in which land masses rise up after spending millions of years being buried under ice, which can also lead to a slight change in mass distribution. So what kind of connotations does this have for the future of colonizing Mars? As of right now, none, honestly. It's not really a change large enough that anyone should be worried about it jeopardizing any of Elon's future endeavors, but it's definitely a shocking discovery, like many, if not all, the discoveries on this list that bring us closer to a greater understanding of our ever-expanding universe.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the wandering black hole. If you keep up with space news, you'll know that lately, and rightfully so, it's been flooded with news of the James Webb Telescope as it unfurls and reaches its destination at L2, but while this is exciting and very promising, we have to take some time to remember our roots. The James Webb was preceded by the infamous Hubble Space Telescope. The Hubble walked so James Webb could run. Since its launch into low Earth orbit in the 1990s, this space telescope has been delivering us amazing space discoveries, and this one is a bit of a frightening one. Back in 2017, the Hubble located a black hole, which is already frightening, but this one was peculiar. That is because they found that this one was basically being pulled or manipulated by gravitational waves. Basically what this means is that at some point this black hole is going to escape its own galaxy and begin roaming into the universe. Black holes are bad enough, I don't want them to start wandering around. The good news, however, is that despite this black hole weighing approximately the same as 1 billion suns, as it flies through space at 5 million miles per hour, it's estimated to be about 8 billion light years away from Earth, so we're pretty safe at this point. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Trementina Base. This is a location that was, of course, discovered using satellite imaging, and you might be wondering what this base holds that makes it so unsettling. Well, that is because this is the location that belongs to the Scientology-affiliated Church of Spiritual Technology. If you are unfamiliar, Scientology is a set of beliefs and practices that were invented by L. Ron Hubbard, and it has been variously defined as a cult. The core belief of this group is that humans are immortal and that our bodies are essentially just a shell to house us. There's also some alien stuff in there I'm not quite so sure about. This group is quite controversial, not only for the beliefs of the group, but because of their illegal activities that also occur, like fraud or spying on the government. There have been numerous superior court judgments which have not only called this group a dangerous cult, but also a manipulative, profit-making business as well. So this base is said to belong to the Church of Spiritual Technology, and they are said to be an entity that was formed to manage the copyright affairs of the Church of Scientology. This base is supposed to provide storage space for an archiving project, which is meant to preserve founder L. Ron Hubbard's writings, films, and recordings for future generations, which is definitely a terrifying thought. It is said that these texts have been engraved on stainless steel tablets that are encased in titanium capsules and held underground. Maybe a little overzealous if you ask me. In our number 8 spot today, we have Stereo A. The Solar Terrestrial Relations Observatory, or STEREO for short, is a solar observation mission that was first launched in 2006. The mission saw the launch of 2 spacecrafts, Stereo A and B, and they were sent into orbit around the Sun. This has caused the spacecraft to pull ahead of and fall behind the Earth, which has given them the opportunity to use their stereoscopic capabilities to get imaging of the Sun, as well as phenomena such as coronal mass ejection, which is exactly what we are here to talk about today. In July of 2012, there was a CME, often referred to as a sort of solar superstorm, that tore through Earth's orbit, but luckily Earth wasn't there. The same couldn't be said, however, for the Stereo A spacecraft, as this storm and the craft collided. If this event had occurred just 1 week prior to when it did, Earth would have been right in the midst of it, however, so we were pretty narrowly missed. The Stereo A spacecraft has been able to remain operational despite this hot encounter. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Lost City. In 2011, archaeologist Sarah Parcak used high-resolution and NASA satellites in order to look for subtle differences on the surface of the Earth, and she used this in order to pinpoint the locations of buried ancient pyramids, towns, and ancient tombs in Egypt. This would allow her and her team to find these spots from thousands of miles away so that they could then go and excavate them. While this method led to many amazing discoveries, perhaps the most notable of all is the discovery of a 3,000-year-old Egyptian city. She and her team had found the lost ancient city of Tanis, which lies about 2 hours northeast of Cairo. Through this satellite imaging, she was able to find networks of streets and such that are completely invisible from the ground. The imaging also shows that the city is filled with underground tombs as well. Sarah explains why she enjoys what she does so much, saying, quote, "What's incredible about archaeology is literally every day archaeologists are making headlines by making the most incredible discoveries." Well, Sarah, this is certainly one of them. In our number 6 spot today, we have whales. There are quite a few satellites that orbit our Earth, and there has been for years, but as time goes on, we find new ways to use the information that they give us. According to an article written on January 20th of this year, there is a new study that is showing how, as satellite imagery improves, it is being used to accurately identify whales that have been stranded on beaches. The article goes on to explain why this is important, saying, quote, "For as long as humans have been monitoring the ocean, the only way we've known about stranded whales was to stumble upon them ourselves. But knowing about stranded whales, including where and when they strand and how many are ashore, is vitally important. Largely due to human causes such as ship strikes, pollution, and entanglement in fishing gear, whale strandings are on the rise. Their occurrence can often signal that something is amiss and hint at a larger ecosystem problem, such as a harmful algal bloom, yet the ground-based networks used to monitor stranded whales are biased towards wealthy, highly populated regions. It is very true that despite their enormous size, many of these creatures that wash up on remote coastlines or in resource-limited nations or in countries experiencing conflict end up going completely unnoticed." In our number 5 spot today, we have the SS Yasim wreck. The SS Yasim was a Bolivian cargo ship that sank on the evening of December 1st, 2003. For a while, no one was quite sure as to why it sank, as well as the fact that no one could find the wreck. This is exactly why it was so surprising when, a few years ago, the Google Maps team located the sunken vessel based on their satellite imaging. The ship was found on its side, perhaps in the same location it initially sank, in Wingate Reef just off of the coast of Sudan. This wreck then became one of the largest visible on Google Earth until quite recently. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Lake of Blood. This is another find that came as someone was scrolling along and looking at all there is to see on Google Maps all the way back in 2007. This is when they noticed a blood-red lake that sat just outside of Sadr City in Iraq. Many people began to speculate what this could be about, including a ton of macabre ideas. There was even a rumor going around that said a local slaughterhouse in the area would sometimes dump their blood into canals, but this seems a little unnecessary and very unlikely. There hasn't yet been an official explanation for what exactly made the water so red, but it's most likely that the red color is due to sewage, pollution, or possibly some sort of water treatment process. I can understand why the startling image would get people's imaginations going, but it is likely a pretty reasonable explanation. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Gobi Desert structure. This is one discovery that had conspiracy theorists' minds absolutely swirling. About a decade ago, someone was searching through some Google Maps images when they found a mysterious array of structures and patterns that appeared to be etched into the surface of the Gobi Desert, which is located in China. The structures are reminiscent of geoglyphs, but are seemingly much more modern and newly created. The speculations of what this structure could be or why it was created went wild, with people saying that they were street maps of American cities or messages either to or from some sort of extraterrestrials. The list of bizarre theories just goes on. While this is still sort of conspiracy sounding, this is likely the most reasonable explanation for what these structures are, and that is that these structures are used to help calibrate China's spy and radar satellites. To be fair, this does make a lot of sense, and I don't have any other ideas for what it could possibly be. In our number 2 spot today, we have Leo 1. So, we live on Earth, which is one of the planets in our solar system, and our solar system sits in a galaxy that we call the Milky Way. There are other galaxies out there that are potentially similar to ours, but there are also things called satellite galaxies. So you know how our solar system is a solar system because we are bound to and orbiting around our sun? Well, basically these satellite galaxies are like that, but with bigger galaxies. Like, they orbit around our galaxy. It's a whole thing about gravity and all of that science-y stuff, but in the end, here in the Milky Way, we have about 50 satellite galaxies that orbit us, and the particular one I want to talk about right now is called Leo 1. We started investigating this specific one because of the fact that researchers realized that it doesn't contain a lot of dark matter. While studying this galaxy, it was found that although it is small, it has a massive black hole at the center of it. Like, it's so big in comparison to the galaxy itself that this black hole is almost as big as the one we have here in the Milky Way, which is unprecedented data. This discovery could lead scientists to redefining what their understanding is of how all galaxies formed. The galaxies are the building blocks of the universe, so this would be immensely interesting and important information, and it could change a lot of what we once believed. In our number 1 spot today we have the missing hiker. This one is a little different from the others on today's list, but it's a super interesting story that involves using satellites, and I had to share it with you. A man by the name of Ben Kuo has a hobby where he enjoys looking at different satellite imagery in order to look at all places all over the world. He has said, quote, "You can look and see what's going on in the world no matter where it is. It's kind of fascinating what you can see." He then went on to describe how it's kind of trivial, but he loves it, and in this case it was more useful than trivial. The case he is referring to took place in April of 2021 when a hiker named Rene Campion got lost in the Angeles National Forest. While lost with little reception and low battery on his phone, Rene was able to send one photo to his roommate, which he sent in hopes to give a clue about his location. The photo showed his legs with a sort of canyon below, and while I look at the photo and go, okay, he's somewhere that has rocks, I guess, people like Ben see this as a stellar clue. Ben said, quote, "Actually, I looked at the picture and I said, I bet I can find where this guy is." Ben used his own knowledge of hiking trails in the area as well as sites like Google Earth and EO Browser in order to zero in on where the missing hiker could be. It took Ben about 20 to 30 minutes to find what he thought was the location of the missing person, and he passed along the info to the search and rescue team. In the end, when the sheriff's department went out to investigate, they found the missing man less than a mile from where Ben suggested he might be. Once found and informed of how they located him, Rene said, quote, "I was like, wow, I didn't realize somebody had a hobby doing stuff like that. I owe him my life and everybody else that was involved in helping." Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Van Allen radiation belt. The Explorer 1 was the first satellite that was launched by the United States, and of course, right off the bat, we were finding some unexpected, slightly unsettling things. Launched on February 1st, 1958, this satellite was the first to discover the Van Allen radiation belt. Basically, the radiation belt is a zone of charged energetic particles, most of which originate from solar wind. These particles are captured and then held around a planet's magnetosphere. So while other planets can and do have these belts, Earth has two main ones, but sometimes others are created temporarily. Basically, these belts help to protect our atmosphere from destruction, so we like the belt, but when discoveries like this one happened, it reminds us of how dangerous space can really be. So, NASA launched some space probes that were meant to specifically check out the belts, and in 2013 it was reported that the Van Allen probes had discovered a transient third radiation belt. This third belt was observed for just 4 weeks until it ended up being obliterated by a powerful interplanetary shockwave from the sun. How terrifying is that? Left just as quickly as it came. Thankfully, our main two are still intact, and that really is all we can hope for. In our number 9 spot today, we have TESS. New data from NASA's transiting Exoplanet survey satellite is showing that it has been able to discover 5,000 objects of interest. The list of objects has been growing since 2018, and in the last year alone, it has increased by 1,600. Here's the thing about this list of objects of interest, though. They're of interest because they are thought that they might possibly harbor some kind of alien life. Whether it's the smallest, most primitive forms or something more, it's all exceptionally interesting, and the list is growing faster and faster every year, which is a testament to the great work being done by the teams responsible for the mission. As of right now, the next step in the TESS mission will be taking place in 2025, which will hopefully reveal more candidates for planets. In our number 8 spot today, we have Ahuna Mons. In 2015, during the time of NASA's Dawn mission, this little orbiter made a startling discovery near the equator of a dwarf planet called Sirius. This discovery came in the shape of a volcano sort of mountain that was later revealed by NASA to be a cryovolcano that, when active, releases frigid, salty water sometimes mixed with mud in place of the molten lava that we see on an Earth-style volcano. In the photos of the volcano, you can see these super interesting bright streaks that run down the sides, which experts say are salt deposits that are left over from the formation of it. It is said that basically plumes of salt water and mud rose up and erupted from the planet, which punctured the surface and created the mountain we can see now. Perhaps not the scariest thing on this list, but seeing how differently other worlds formed to ours always leaves me with so many questions. In our number 7 spot today, we have Mount St. Helens. Over 40 years have passed since the huge, devastating eruption of Mount St. Helens that truly changed the landscape of the Pacific Northwest for hundreds of miles. While this may not have been the most huge and devastating blast ever in the history of the Earth, the thing that sets this one apart is the technology we have available to us now. Since the eruption, experts and researchers have been able to obtain the satellite imagery from the days around the eruption, which occurred on May 18, 1980. This imagery came from the Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite 3, and this was very useful because rather than a land satellite, which follows a predetermined ground track in order to collect imagery from the entire planet, this satellite provides a constant view of the same area, which is normally great for monitoring weather, but this time it just allowed us to see one of the worst eruptions in US history unfold. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Tonga eruption. Speaking of volcanic eruptions, there are some incredibly terrifying images that were captured of the Tonga volcanic eruption that occurred just recently. This powerful underwater volcano eruption unleashed a force that was equivalent to 4 to 18 megatons of TNT. It blanketed the island nation of Tonga in ash, it sent tsunami waves across the world, and it even sent ripples through Earth's ionosphere, the outer layer of the atmosphere. The same sort of satellite used to capture the imagery of Mount St. Helens, the one that examines the same area, also were able to capture the Tonga eruption, and it truly shows you just how powerful the blast really is. You can see very clearly the umbrella cloud, you can see shock waves and even lightning strikes. These images are a terrifying reminder of just how devastating these blasts can be, while there is little to nothing that we can do to stop it. In our number 5 spot today, we have Tilly the turtle. Apparently this is now just a list of volcano related satellite imagery, but I swear this one was so interesting I had to share it with you. So it is again related to the Tonga volcano, but it involves a little turtle named Tilly. So, Tilly was rescued a few years ago after being stuck in a net with no hope of survival, and she was brought to a special rehabilitation center to help her recover. In November of 2020, Tilly was ready to be released back into her proper home, so she was tagged with a special transmitter and released at Flynn Reef, just off the coast of Cairns. Once released, Tilly began her journey east towards the Pacific Islands, and since she had that little tracker on her, her journey could be watched. This is where the satellite imagery comes in. The citizens of the Great Barrier Reef tracking map shows that sweet Tilly traveled 1,867 kilometers over 47 days, but then, just 2 days before the Tonga eruption, seemingly out of nowhere, she made a huge U-turn and started heading back towards the Queensland coast. Tilly knew something was about to happen. Jenny Gilbert from the rehabilitation center where Tilly recovered said, quote, "She was obviously feeling something. There must have been vibrations, and she has turned around and started heading back towards Queensland." You hear about these stories, particularly with tsunamis, where animals try to start getting themselves out of the danger zone. I've never seen it happen before, and I think it's just incredible. This might be more fascinating than unsettling, but it just reminds us of how brilliant the animals we share the earth with really are, and while we are rightfully concerned about the humans who were affected by this eruption, it also must have been pretty terrifying for the animals in the area as well. All around, just a horrible situation. In our number 4 spot today, we have GSN 069. I think we can all agree that getting close to a black hole would be an exceptionally terrifying experience for anyone, especially considering a brush with one is likely to mark the end of an object's journey, but that isn't always the case. In the galaxy that we refer to as GSN 069, there is a star that is currently orbiting a black hole and managing to survive while undergoing some pretty extreme changes. According to astronomers, this star was first a red giant when it began to approach the black hole, but as it first swept past, the huge siphoning black hole ate up all of the star's outer hydrogen layers, which eventually left it as a white dwarf. Now this white dwarf has become trapped in a sort of oblong orbit around the black hole because while it's close, it's just out of reach enough that it hasn't fallen in yet. The star is at a distance of about 15 times the radius of the event horizon of the black hole, and each lap around takes about 9 hours. Another unusual thing about this orbit is due to the gravity of the black hole, which is of course going to have a major influence. Each time the star orbits, it's being flung in a slightly different direction, which means that its orbit rotates over time and it ends up resembling a sort of rosette. In our number 3 spot today, we have Kepler 78b. Kepler 78b is an exoplanet that finds its cozy home orbiting around the star called Kepler 78. Its first discovery came in 2013 by the Kepler Space Space Telescope, and upon discovery, it was thought that this exoplanet was the most similar to Earth because of its mass, radius, and mean density. It's a terrestrial planet, it likely has an iron core. What more could we look for in a planet? Well, we could definitely look for one that isn't hellishly hot like this one. This exoplanet orbits around its parent star once every 8.5 hours, and it's super close to it. Like, I'm talking 40 times closer to its star than Mercury is to our sun. That's way too close. Kepler 78b likes to feature a temperature of around 2030 to 2830 degrees Celsius, which would likely be a little uncomfortable. The temperature is high enough that it has stripped the planet of any stable atmosphere, and it is said that instead of being an Earth-like planet, Kepler 78b is more like a lava planet. To put an even more interesting twist on this wild, hot exoplanet, according to the astronomer Dimitar Sasalov from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, quote, "This lava world is an abomination. There's no physical way a small world, only 12% larger than Earth, could have evolved in that location, and there's no known mechanism that could have transported it there. But one thing that is certain, it can't stay roasting in that hellish orbit for long. It's destined to get swallowed by its star very soon. Right now, it is estimated that Kepler 78b is going to be swallowed by a star in about 3 billion years, which is just another reason we can cross it off our list for Earth 2.0. In our number 2 spot today, we have ESO 593 IG008. This is a discovery that first came with the Hubble Space Telescope, and it showed us one thing, but when re-examined later with the ESO's Very Large Telescope, it showed us more details. With the Hubble images, ESO 593 IG008 was previously known as a pair of interacting galaxies at a distance of 650 million light years. One is a spiral galaxy while the other is more irregular, and while this is already supremely interesting, the VLT images revealed quite the surprise. This surprise came in the way of a third, clearly separate, massive galaxy that seems to be forming stars as frantically as possible. Some areas of these colliding galaxies are moving faster than 400 kilometers a second, and it's said that seeing 3 galaxies of this size merging is something that is quite rare. While it is very unsettling to think of a 3-galaxy collision, the imagery from it is absolutely stunning. In our number 1 spot today, we have the supervoid. This is a discovery that was first seen by NASA's WMAP satellite in 2004, and it was later confirmed in 2013 by the ESA's Planck mission. Basically, there's a cold spot in the universe which can be seen clearly in the radiation left from the Big Bang, and we aren't quite sure what it is or what it means. Throughout the years, every time we've attempted to remap the cosmic microwave background with more resolution and better technology than we previously had, one of the mysteries that always remains is the cold spot, and it gets more peculiar every time. Quite recently, a new theory that could possibly explain the cold spot was put forward, and at the moment it seems like it's a theory that most people are agreeing with. Basically, it has to do with a supervoid. The cosmic web is made up of clusters and superclusters of galaxies, and they are pulled to each other by gravity, of course, and sometimes they are accelerated away from each other by the mysterious, not quite understood force that is dark energy. Between these clusters of galaxies are what are called voids, the areas that contain fewer galaxies, which in turn means they contain less matter. So basically, there's a supervoid, one of the largest known to humanity, and it's located within the constellation of Eridanus. It's a massive, elongated, cigar-shaped void that's just a cool 1.8 billion light years wide, and it's said that it contains 30% less matter than the surrounding galactic regions. It is thought that perhaps this huge supervoid might be responsible for the cold spot, but at this point, there are still tons of questions that are just waiting to be answered.